Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I'm Vadim Perlovsky, and today we're excited to welcome a brand that we've been looking forward to tasting for years now. I was finally lucky enough to meet Becky, who is our local brand ambassador for Constellation Spirits, who also represents High West. And she is as passionate and excited about this brand as we are. So, match made in heaven. We're super excited to have you here. So Becky Smith is here to tell us all about High West. We're going to taste some exceptional expressions from High West. Tell us all about the updates. We know there's been some changes over the last few years, but we are looking forward to hearing and learning more about the brand, about the liquid, everything that we're tasting today. We have 6 expressions in front of us. And Becky, when you get a second, tell us the order we should pour those in. I know some people have 6 glasses in front of them, so and if we should leave some for later, which most people do anyway, but we'll figure that out. But we're excited. If you're here for the first time, welcome. We're here to ask questions, get nerdy. Feel free to chime in. There we go. Tim's got comments. We do use the chat very well. We unmute and participate in the polls. So all that said, welcome everyone. If you are not participating, I'm going to keep you on mute so we don't get background noise. But other than that, enjoy and have fun.
Awesome. Thank you. And I did have a presentation to kind of like lead us as we go through. That way, you can kind of see on screen. I know I'm a big visual learner, so I always love to see it, especially when you're throwing out numbers and data and things of that nature. Our tasting lineup will kind of go through, but if you want to go ahead and put them in order, we're going to start with our bourbon. And then we're going to go with our cash strength bourbon, which is the one in this. Ooh, looks like this guy. It's going to, well, for you guys, it doesn't matter, but this is what it looks like. Hopefully they're all labeled clearly for you. From there, we're going to go to our double rye, followed by our rendezvous rye. And then we're going to do high country and round out the night with campfire. So I'll let everybody have a chance to kind of get that settled. I'm going to hopefully think Zoom will share properly with us.
Not working? It should work on your end.
It is. I just have to, let's see later. All right, let's see if now it'll share. Here we go. Perfect. All right, everybody can see everything all right? Give me a thumbs up.
Looks great.
Awesome. So also I'm not sure if everybody, if anybody's been to Park City, where we set our roots. We started in 2006. In Park City, you can see our original saloon and distillery. We started with a 250-gallon copper pot still, which is still operational today. In fact, that's where we do a lot of our innovation. Just having fun, doing something funky. When we're starting in small batches and have an idea, we still start with that original copper pot before we do anything scalable up at the main distillery. Just a little bit about me. It's always like, who is this person that's talking to us? I'm based here in Los Angeles. I cover all of Southern California from Huntington Beach up to Paso and out to Mammoth. But for the past 2 years, I had all of Southern California. Had the pleasure of representing Constellation Brands craft spirits portfolio, but our darling, really jewel in the cap is High West. It is the darling and really what has helped us grow, I would say our reputation in the craft spirits world is acquiring this brand from Dave and Jane Perkins. But anyway, for me, it's such a pleasure to get to represent High West because I'm such a fan. When I started in hospitality several years ago in Santa Monica, my mentor in the industry was, introducing me to some really cool stuff and, really showing me the ropes. And even though I'm from the South, I wasn't a huge rye fan. Just didn't really sit well with my palate at the time and was something I just wasn't truly interested in or wasn't jiving with. And he was like, you need to try High West. And it was Rendezvous Rye that he introduced me to. And he told me that it was out of Utah, which I thought was ludicrous. And I was like, surely they can't make good whiskey. Like, that sounds weird. And boy, was I wrong. It was the first rye I truly loved. I put it in my bar. I trained my staff on it, and we sold a good amount of it just because we were all, just all enamored with the brand. I basically, just I worked for 10 years in television, really enjoyed that, but then needed a change of pace. So I came out to Southern California 7 years ago, worked in hospitality the whole time, and have just honestly launched myself in. This was always a passion, love traveling and food and culture, and it's evolved into a profession. So I'm pretty darn lucky that I get to blend what I really love, into what I have to do every day. So I'm pretty darn lucky. I don't know if she's on yet. I know she was running late, but I did want to introduce or call out our new craft spirit specialist, Bianca. She comes from the trade world as well. She's actually from the SoCal area, but she'll be popping on here in a little bit. She just joined us about a month or so ago, and she'll be taking over the reins and leading this portfolio in High West throughout Southern California. So any questions, hopefully she can help me monitor the chat because I can't really see it here with my screen. So let's kick it off. I just always like to say, High West, we obviously were very different. You can kind of see in the screen the tagline, we're goddamn pioneers. And boy, do we believe that to the core. Being in Utah, being nestled in the mountains isn't typically what folks think of when they think of American whiskey. When you think of 85% of the American whiskey comes from Kentucky, it's kind of, when you have those outliers in Tennessee, and honestly, now it's grown so much in other states, it's really exciting. That we were some of the first. We kind of kickstarted that American craft whiskey. And so that's a really, big feather in our cap and highlight for us that we not only, pushed boundaries and got through a lot of red tape to open a distillery in the state of Utah, when we all know they have some of the toughest and strictest alcohol laws, not even just liquor, in the US. So a lot of people, I'm sure, thought Dave was pretty darn crazy. But I think he was an innovator. I think he's a very smart man, a humble man, but he's built up quite a brand that we are all now stewards of. Not quite 20 years old just yet, but we're coming up close on that. So speaking of Dave and Jane, I always like to start our story, obviously giving them their credit. So Dave actually was a biochemist by trade. He had done that for quite a long time, pretty successful at it, but he was just kind of, maybe looking and itching for something different in his life. And him and his lovely wife, Jane, who's actually the great granddaughter of a master distiller that they were making single malt. She and him were out at Maker's Mark, actually. They were there for a wedding, probably did what a lot of us do if we're going to be in that part of the country. And, they decided, let's do a tour. So they were walking the grounds and they were, seeing everything and all the components. And Dave just had this inspiration, as a biochemist, he saw a lot of parallels to what they were doing at the distillery versus, his own background and his own training and experiences. And he just kind of had this idea of like, I could do that. Like, I could do this. And so Jane was honestly kind of on board. He came from that family. Kind of to seal the deal, as they tell the story, is they went to their hotel room that night, and kind of drew that inspiration for the name from Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter. So that's kind of how this whole vision and aesthetic of High West began for them. And we set out, from there. It was kind of like, well, where are we going to do it? So if you think about the early 2000s, obviously not a lot going on in terms of distillation in Utah, but it's not too far off. I love showing this slide in particular and talking to people about it, because it truly shows you the trajectory of, the whiskey history in Utah, which most people don't know about it, or they're just unaware. But you can see the earliest date and records we have is dating back to 1826. Our flagship rye whiskey, Rendezvous, is named after this. It's called the Mountain Man Rendezvous. It's kind of like a festival of tradesmen. They'd come in and they would trade pelts and whiskey and meats and things like that, and come around the campfire. And so it's crazy to think, before Utah was even a state, they were obviously making something out there. And then sometimes one of the first recordings of it written down about specifically whiskey, was actually Mark Twain. So in 1860, it's documented in one of his writings that he tasted Valley Tan, and we can talk about that a little more later. But Valley Tan is a very it's a a part of in Utah, a piece of land. The wheat there is incredibly coarse. It's very volatile, and hard to tame. We did release a Valley Tan whiskey if you've ever had it. It's got a really scary looking man on it. His name is Porter. He was the destroyer angel, associated with Brigham Young. But anyways, Mark Twain talks about that whiskey as being some of the foulest thing he'd ever had. So you can imagine back in the 1800s, especially out west, I don't think they were making the most potable of whiskey. You fast forward obviously a little bit, and we know that in 1870, that's really the last record of a legal distillery being operated in the state of Utah. We became a state, not too long after. And then, of course, Prohibition set. For us in Utah, we're always proud that we cast the deciding vote to end Prohibition. You're all welcome. Um, so, obviously something we really celebrate, we have a good time with, especially at the distillery. And then that leads us to 2006 with the breaking ground of High West in Park City. We were the first legal distillery in the state of Utah since 1870. So when I say we are true pioneers, we broke ground on that. That is authentic to us. That is part of our story. And it's really cool to see now dozens of others following suit, wineries, more breweries. But then I think it also opens, the gateway for other states like Nevada and Arizona. You hear in these kind of like desert, more arid places that they're opening distilleries and doing really cool things. So we like to think that we kind of laid that foundation. Part of us for the early 2000s and why Utah, Dave loved to ski. He was a mountain guy, grew up in California. His family was living in Colorado at the time, when all of this inspiration for High West was coming about. And he just had a love for the Mountain West. He was absolutely loves being outdoors, wanted to protect that, was really important to who he is as a person and his family. He had relationships out there. So he was after the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, they temporarily lifted the alcohol restrictions, really allowing for more alcohol sales. And we all know money talks. So I'm sure officials and such saw the influx of cash and revenue that was generated from the Olympics and alcohol sales. And they were like, you know what? Maybe we're onto something. Maybe we could allow this. So a lot of red tape, a lot of, work to get this open. But we can proudly say that we did open ground in 2006 and our first bottling was in 2007. So I don't like to talk too much without having a sip first. So I know you guys are pros. This is kind of already in the deck. I always just like to have it up there. If you've been to the distillery, you'll see we kind of have these fun markers throughout if you do the tour. So, obviously wherever you're at, whether you're a novice or you just are absolutely incredibly educated on this, it's always fun to see the process. And definitely that piece number 3 with the fermenting, that's where that biochem comes. If you go through the distillery, for anyone that hasn't, you'll see kind of on chalkboards this exact thing. You see chemical compounds and structures and organic chemistry kind of all throughout. So it's obviously very near to Dave's story and who he was and his trade. Again, this is part of just a whole deck, so bear with me. Mostly what we're going to be tasting today is going to be a combination or straight of obviously corn. We've got rye, that's what we're known for, and then barley. We will be having a unique blend with our American single malt. And then, of course, we're going to have campfire that has a little bit of all 3 of these in there, which is really exciting. It's something I enjoy every year. So let's start with the bourbon. We'll kick it off. You guys are actually drinking our newest batch. So we switched up part of the component. We do a dual mash bill of straight bourbon. We source from MGP. We're very transparent about that. So feel free to go ahead and start, start nosing, start tasting. Obviously this is your time and your night. But we started making the bourbon Probably about now, I think it's been about 12 years, maybe 13. We start to lose track after time. We've made so many whiskeys and the years start to blend together. But the bourbon in this particular batch that you guys are drinking is a blend of 2 up to 15 years. So you're getting obviously very young whiskey all the way up to more mature whiskey, and then of course, some blended in there are been, I would say, what are some of the things you need to make a whiskey? And people tell me water, you need grain, you need wood. And I'm like, you need time. You have to have time, to age that. Well, being a young distillery, we didn't have any barrels laid back. We weren't making anything of our own at the time. So, of course, we had to go source that. And we knew we wanted a rye. Dave had looked at the marketplace, very smart guy, and was just like, at the time, things that were labeled rye either weren't really great quality, weren't in the price point he was looking to be at, or were barely, considered a rye. So even if it was a straight rye, it was maybe that 51 to 53%. So that's kind of where we started. Obviously, we have evolved from there, but MGP has been with us from the start. We've worked over the years, we've worked with a lot of other distilleries to, work on our blends. But that's who we are. At the end of the day, we're master blenders. And over time, we've become master distillers, which is really cool because sometimes you don't get both. But we'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about Brendan and the crew. But with this bourbon, it is a blend from MGP. You can see the mash bill on there. I don't think I need to read it to you. And then we also partner with an undisclosed distillery out of Kentucky due to contractual agreements. Now that we're Constellation owned, we are not allowed to divulge that. You guys are smart cookies. If you've been tasting a lot of American whiskeys, I think you can probably decipher, but I'm not going to tell you. I am curious to see what you guys think about this. So feel free to come off mute, and I will shut up so I can taste a little bit. Also, one thing about me, I don't do a lot of tasting notes. I'm not from that, you're going to taste toasted apricots and burnt leather and, things of that nature. I really want you to explore it yourself and what your palate, comes to life with your palate. So I always think that's where the fun discussion is. I think I was tasting one time and someone was like, I get popcorn and I get, other things. What I will say with the bourbon, I think the most surprising thing I typically get from folks is they don't realize how earthy it is. You think of, usually a high percentage of corn, it's going to be a bit sweeter, a bit more of that brown sugar, and, just those softer notes. I love our bourbon because it does have a decent amount of rye. It gets that structure in there, and just a nice, vegetal layer. But anyways, yeah, you guys chime in, let me know what you think. And I'm going to check the chat too. Do you have any bold folks?
Yeah, I'm not shy. It's interestingly sweet. I was kind of surprised because I'm used to bourbon having that sweetness to it, but this has actually got a bit more of it. It's that caramel apple and biscuity cookie kind of note to it that I find quite interesting. And I would assume that part of the cookie note is probably from the malted barley, but it's kind of fascinating. It's got a lot going on without really being completely overpowering. It's kind of fun. I like it.
Anyone else?
I think it's got great flavor. I've been a big High West fan. I've got 7 bottles here, and ironically, none of them are the bourbon. So this is actually my first time tasting the bourbon, and it's got a really good flavor. I agree with Jane. It's surprisingly sweet.
That's so funny. And then my palate is like, I definitely get those notes, but maybe it's because I drink this so much that I start to pick out some of those. I will say I am drinking the 2022 batch. And I don't know if you guys can see it well on your screen, or if you have a bottle, but you can actually, when you look at the label, you can see, right under where it says bourbon, a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys, it'll say batch number. I can help you decipher that code if you ever are looking for a bottle or want to interpret it, but you'll see that first 2 numbers is obviously the year. I say obviously, guess to me it is. So in this slide, it says 22. So that's the year that it was batched and bottled. From there, it's going to have a letter. So that's going to be the corresponding month. So in this case, for this picture, I think that's the letter B. So it was done in February. And then this is the bottle number. So you can kind of see, well, not bottle number, sorry, batch number. So you can kind of see, what time of year it was done, what year it was done, what time of year, and then you can kind of see in the sequence of batches where it stood. So I'm actually sipping the 2022, which was, that was the last year we changed our Kentucky component. So the MGP part of the mash bill has stayed the same, but we actually, with the 2023 batch, we switched it up. So we're getting a different distillate from a different distillery and a different mash bill, a little bit higher on corn, a little bit less rye, which is why I would maybe say you're getting a little more of that sweetness probably coming through versus what I'm tasting right now.
Now, is this different than the American Prairie bourbon?
No, it is not. Actually, here, I'll go to the next slide because we'll talk about that. Obviously, we've gone through quite a logo and label change if you guys have followed us for a while, and I can kick back to this one. But this is you can see obviously our new packaging, new lineup. We did return this year, late 2023, I should say. We brought back what we're calling our core 4, our best of the West. So Campfire and Rendezvous are now everyday, findings. They're not limited releases. But to answer your question, here's some details on our label change. American Prairie, we swapped out because it's actually a nature preserve up in Northeast Montana. So we started making the bourbon for them. They wanted a bourbon that they could sell, for proceeds at their property as they were building out that land. And we were like, hey, we don't do bourbon. But then they thought about it. And, after some conversations, that's when we started making it. And 10% of proceeds of every bottle goes to American Prairie. Sustainability, but also community involvement is really, really important to who we are. So after all that time of seeing, let's see, I don't have an old bottle on me of the American Prairie, but there was honestly just a lot of confusion. So when we decided we were going to switch up the labels in 2022, we took off American Prairie on the label because folks were thinking it was a type of bourbon, not necessarily knowing the background of the story and the nature preserve. So it's still the same juice. It's still the same blending techniques. We just dropped American Prairie. So it's just High West bourbon now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can see kind of some other questions, why the name change. I think part of it, I like to go back. I really love looking at this evolution. We worked with Ed Mell, who is a well-known artist, to design our labels. So you can see up in that top, top left corner is the American Prairie bourbon, the original label. And in spring of 2022, we launched this more still sepia toned, but a little more of the grayscale sketches. So instead of kind of that, I guess it's like a deer antelope kind of thing, we now have a ram. You'll see with double rye, instead of our cowboy coming through the saloon doors, you just have the saloon doors with a cowboy hat. The others, we're still, these are in particular the Ed Mell artist series with Rendezvous, Campfire, and High Country. You can see it's really cool, very, what's the word I'm looking for? That art style, and I'm blanking on the name now. She have one sip of whiskey and I'm forgetting. But kind of that impressionist art, I believe, is maybe what it's called. Not an art major. But you can see now we've evolved. We've got the beautiful horse for Rendezvous, Campfire, obviously just a sketch of a campfire, and then High Country is still that mountain range. Midwinter, we did not edit too much. We tried to keep that fairly authentic, maybe just a few, enhancements. And maybe the most significant outside of American Prairie is Boo Rye. And I don't know about you guys, but I love our new little guy. He's super cheeky. I always love telling that story. And then in 2022, we released Prisoner Share. So you can see that if you're familiar with the Prisoner Wine Company, it's a pretty familiar label, but comes from Francisco Goya, who is an artist who painted through the Spanish Inquisition or the Spanish Wars, and he did a whole series called Disasters of War. And this is how Prisoner gets his name. Is this particular one is called Le Petit Prisonnier. So Constellation also owns Prisoner, so it was a nice little collab for us. Any other questions on the label or any of the bottlings before we pop to our next spirit?
And by the way, Becky, I looked up a picture of the bottle that we had for this, and we're actually tasting 22 IO2.
Oh, okay. So you guys are tasting the older. I'll be honest, we never know what's getting shipped from the warehouse. So I have a bottle. I figured I just pulled samples, and this is a 2023. Let's see, it was bottled in May. So I just assumed we got these around the same time. You would probably be drinking a 23, but
And in the photo it's a 22, so I assume it's 22.
all right.
You said you can tell us how to decipher. So 22 IO2. What is IO?
I will be whatever month that corresponds to. So you gotta count through. Gotta do some math and just be like January, February, March, and then you'll find what a month. So that was a September bottling, and then your batch number is basically corresponds to the batch. It's not a barrel number. It's a batching number.
Gotcha.
September. You guys are on it. I love that. Tim, it's a pronghorn. That's someone else, a jackalope. On the Boo Rye, it's a jackalope. I think a pronghorn is right. I think I've heard that before. I'm always like, I'm not sure. It's an animal. Any other questions about the bourbon? I don't want to like jump to the next one if there's anything outstanding.
Are you laying down casks of your own bourbon that you're making in house?
Yeah, so actually we've been laying down our own bourbon for quite a few years now. It's been gaining a lot of age. I'd heard from our production team that, we thought, hey, maybe our own bourbon juice might start to get blended in, but they haven't quite done that yet. So I always say about High West, they keep a lot of things close to the vest, and you don't know until you know. On the flip side of that, never say never. So when people are like, we missed this, is this coming back? I'm always like, with that team, you just don't know. They honestly, if they just land on a blend or a distillate that they are just absolutely loving, you just don't know what's going to come, and they might run with it. Obviously, with the Constellation backing, they've got quite a few resources at their disposal to play with and be more innovative. And so that's why out of all the portfolios or all the brands I work with and their portfolios, High West keeps me on my toes because they're constantly doing fun things and experimenting and evolving. And that's what's one of the things that I really, really love about High West and the team there. And in fact, talking about the team, which we'll get to in just a few minutes, it's a lot of the same people. I think that's, usually when you hear an acquisition, a small brand that sells to a bigger company, there's always a hesitation. Are they going to ruin the brand? Or are they going to, everybody's going to leave and it's going to taste different. It's going to feel different. We're really proud to say Brendan's been our distiller since day one. We got him right after he graduated with his master's from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. So obviously a lot of training there with blending. Dave had actually reached out to him and, kind of wooed him to High West and what he was doing. So we're very fortunate for almost our entire tenure that Brendan has been at the helm. We actually have a whole team. I call them kind of the trinity of production, if you will. And I have a slide with them so you can see their faces. But even from our hospitality team, folks that work in bottling and blending and all the warehouses and even in the refectory down at the saloon, we have a lot of people that have been there since day one or very early on. They love it. This is a huge part of, who they are and wanting to stay close to home and that love of Mountain West. So I will say, in their own words, we also have some folks that have departed from the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they've come over to the whiskey side. So it's really cool to hear their stories and, growing up in the state and then watching High West, come to be and seeing all the changes that it's brought. So with that, and speaking of change and evolution, let's introduce the cask collection. This has got to be one of my favorite releases of recent that we've done. If you guys have seen it, I think I have a bottle here. So if you've ever been out in the wild, as I like to say, and you've seen kind of these black labels with the gold embossing, they used to come with a medallion, and you can see they have a limited release, like customized ticker. This was our barrel select program. So basically we make small batches with some fun, and funky finishes, and places like, whiskey bars or, independent bottle shop or something, they could get their own private barrel, have it labeled and customized for just them. And we would do a very small production and say anywhere from 6, to maybe 4 unique finishes to choose from, different blends. We've done it with the double rye traditionally, but in recent years, we've started doing these finishes with the bourbon. Last year, we completely redid our barrel select program, and now it's called Cask Collection. So we updated the label just a little bit. You can see here, you the guys are going to be drinking the barrel that was picked by 7 Grand in downtown LA. Obviously, like, huge whiskey selection there, and they just love High West, which we're so appreciative of. But they were very kind to give us a couple of bottles for the tasting so that you guys could experience this. This is just amazing. We launched this last spring. It hit market in the summertime. And this is our very first cask strength spirit period that we have released commercially from High West. That's, huge for a lot of reasons. But obviously, really big for us and the movement of folks wanting, everything we do is high proof. But a lot of folks are into this cask strength, this non-diluted, we're not getting it watered down once it comes out. So if you're going into the barrel at like, a higher proof, say anywhere like 135, maybe 125, pivot, obviously, depending on spirits and blends. But to come out of the barrel, still with that much heat is really, really cool. This is a blend of straight bourbons. Excuse me. I don't know why this says straight rye. It's not. It is straight bourbons. But anyways, it does range from 6 to 10 years. So we've got obviously a little bit more on the mature side. What is extra cool about this, apart from the high proof, in my opinion, is talking to Tara Lindley, who this was her baby. This is her passion project. She actually sourced from 5 different cooperages for styles of barrels to create and drive the complexity for this flavor profile. So I think, in my opinion, this whiskey brings out a lot of those beautiful, like, sweeter notes that I think you guys called out from our regular bourbon. We did edit the mash bill just a little bit, not to, well, I say we edited it. It's the new mash bill. So for 2023, so that 84% corn, 8% rye, and a little bit of malted barley. But really what makes this extra special is how we aged it with those unique barrels being blended in. It's really, you're capturing different aromas, different flavors, and just having, in my opinion, just kind of telling a little bit of a story. I absolutely love this spirit, but I'll shut up now. I want to hear what you guys think.
It's got a lot more fruit on it. More of them, more like stone fruit than just plain apple. Interesting. Come on, you guys, talk out loud. Don't just type in the chat. Jeez. I don't want to be the only one talking.
I thought the 46% came in a little sweeter than I liked. It's lower rye, and I do kind of prefer lower rye bourbons. But I mean, I think the higher proof gives it more complexity, so I'm still thinking about it, but I prefer it so far.
Elijah, to answer your question, no, not Elijah, sorry, Tim. I'll answer Tim's first and then Elijah, or I guess I already did. You can find the cash strength available. There were a couple of select stores. Because we had tremendous, feedback and support of this particular whiskey. We are releasing a second cask collection this year. Will be coming out this again, like late spring, early summer. So we'll have a cash strength coming out once again. The proof, I believe, is going to be a little different. We haven't gotten too much details yet, but our cask collections for this year were cask strength bourbon, a Cabernet Sauvignon, a Chardonnay, and then a Barbados rum finish. All very, very delicious. They're all with the same mash bill. They're all with those tradition, our aging in itself, with those 5 unique barrel blends and selects. And then each one spends a different time. Obviously, the cask strength doesn't have any extra finishing, but the wine and the rum finishes kind of vary anywhere from 9 up to 11 months. In the history, I haven't really seen with High West anything more than 13 months when we do our cask finishes. Typically, because especially with the bourbon and those, if we're doing wine finishes, they start to overpower, and that's not really what we're going for. We still want the whiskey to shine. This is more of, some nice nuances, give you some extra notes that maybe you don't typically, find in your whiskey. But also we just like to play. So it's kind of hitting that sweet spot for us. And each one is different. I'm liking some of the comments here. We like it. Very smooth I agree, Derek. That was probably my first thought when I tasted this last year was, man, this is really smooth for 120 proof almost. It's still got a nice heat to it, don't get me wrong, but I think it's smooth. Anybody else?
This one definitely tastes older to
smooth,
me.
but it definitely has some a nice heat to it. So you can tell the proof is there, but it's not overwhelming. I get like a really nice, really dark cocoa chocolate note in this one that I really like.
It's so funny. As soon as you said that dark chocolate, that cocoa, it was like the first thing that hit me. I was like, oh yeah, I do see that that coming through, which I'm with you. I really enjoy personally.
Almost got some cedar wood out of it. Don't know where it's coming from, but
I think our tasting notes call out like a sandalwood, so not completely far off. They didn't divulge when Tara was telling us about the barrels and what she was looking for in those profiles to drive that complexity. We didn't really get a breakdown of necessarily what was so nuanced about them. I think a lot of it was sourcing, where they're getting the wood from, and that natural terroir shining through. I would be curious, but sometimes it's becomes a bit proprietary. It's how we stay unique and cutting edge, if you will. But I love all the notes that you guys are pulling out. And I think that this is just a very expressive spirit. And at least for me, every time I drink it or share it with someone, I feel like I'm learning something new about it, which is really exciting. I think that's, a lot of times why we love our spirits. Is it does have a lot of complexity and a lot of storytelling to do.
Is this still available in some of those stores?
Honestly, they're a hit or miss. I haven't been into the stores in a little while to know if they still have it. Sometimes they sell through, like I don't know if you guys are familiar with like a High Times or a K&L or something. They, they'll burn through anytime something new High West comes out. It's like, it's gone pretty quick. I would have to find out to see if there's any open inventory, but also, like I said, we're about to launch another, a new batch, a new release of it. So you should be able to find it. I know the Cabernet, I know the other cask finishes, they hit a little bit later this year. So some didn't even hit SoCal until like January or February. So I'm definitely seeing them. We also did something a little unique. We took 1 barrel of each, if I'm not mistaken, not the cask strength, but the other 3. And we actually labeled them for, small batch of Southern California. So then some of your smaller shops that maybe can't handle and commit to a full barrel, but they took a few cases. So you might be able to find it in a few, and we still have some available for order. So if you have a local bottle shop that you frequent and know that they'll bring in stuff for you, we do still have some open inventory where they're able to, pull a case or two to offer. So it's kind of a nice workaround that we were able, to kind of spread the love there, which we typically don't do. I'm hoping and thinking we'll probably do that method again.
Becky, what's typically the price point on that, the retail price?
I would say I'm typically finding these around $65 to $68. Obviously that's what I would say is fair pricing. Of course,
Right.
There's going to be some that skew a little bit more, but I would say expect around that. So not a complete wallet buster.
No.
We like to say in our world, you don't have to sell a kidney for a good bottle of whiskey. So any other thoughts, questions? My chat thingy, oh, there it is. It went away, but feel free to pop in there. I'll carry on, but you guys, again, this is your time and your night. So feel free to, chime in. I did want to introduce officially our team. These are the people that make it happen. We'll start with Brendan Coyle, who I mentioned. He is our master distiller. He's been with us from the start. A few months ago, he did take a step back as leading the day-to-day operations. He's still consulting and working with us, but he's been with us for almost 20 years, and he kind of wanted to, start doing some other things. A very talented, passionate guy. We are so fortunate to still have him, on Team High West. And even for the last couple of years, he was leading Constellation's craft spirits like operations. So he was working on some of our other brands and helping, how can we collaborate? How can we help each other? Because High West has done it right. They're a brand that started, obviously from super humble beginnings. They really didn't think anybody would like rye whiskey from Utah. And, here we are with such a beautiful following that's really resonated with folks over the years. So appreciate everyone on our journey, and it's not lost on us. So we're super fortunate to have this team pretty intact that are super dedicated. Love to play, which brings me to Isaac. So Isaac is obviously a key part of our team as well. He leads our blending as well as our day-to-day distillation operations. He actually, started in, he was a brewer. So he didn't really have a lot of experience, working with spirits. But Brendan and company kind of, brought him over and really, worked with him. Also really smart guy. I love listening to Isaac talk, and with Brendan, they geek out, and the passion and, the experience, they're not afraid to try something new, which is also really cool. And I mean, you can see it as we constantly evolve. Miss Tara here is, I think she's a rock star. Obviously being a female in this industry is, we're kind of a small percentage here, but to know that she leads all of our sensory, like, I mean, everything that we've been producing the last few years, basically our finishes, but even some of our blending and trying new things, changing up some of our barrel sourcing, all of that is coming from her, doing these sensory experiences, she's really leading that charge. And when I mentioned at Park City, the saloon location, she's leading a lot of those small batches and those trial runs, and let's try and see if this works. And she gets inspiration from different things. And we had just tasted this cask strength, and the whole cask collection was her brainchild. So it's really exciting to have her on the team. She has a wine background and coming from Napa Valley. So it's super, it's super cool to know that she pulls a lot of inspiration, a lot of experience from different pockets. And I would be remiss if I don't talk about Steve and our team, hospitality. We'll definitely dive into what's happening at the distillery and all of our properties out in Utah. But Steve Walton is incredible. He's our head of hospitality. We are an award-winning distillery with award-winning whiskeys, but also we are award-winning bar and restaurant as well. And a lot of people don't know that until you come out and visit. Either at the saloon or up at the refectory. You can have a full, elevated chef pairing and tasting menu. And you can also have, down and dirty bison burger with your whiskey. And we just love to host. It's in our DNA. And I think it's what's part of what, named us whiskey or a distillery of the year, Whiskey Advocate in the late 2010s. I want to say that was 2016 after we broke ground and had been up at the new location up in Wanship. Speaking of some accolades, here's some of the more recent ones. I think we actually need to update this again because some of these have been in 2022 and 2023 competitions, but you can kind of see we've come a long way. Sometimes the points don't matter, but we like to say, we're producing, I would say, pretty damn good whiskey. We have another comment. Let me check that before I go. Sorry, you didn't get the bison burger. Next up is our double rye. So you're going to start to venture into the rye category. This is what we hang our hat on. While we love the bourbon and a lot of people are experiencing, as you guys are, for the first time and getting to explore that part of our skill set and portfolio, we obviously made our name on rye. I can't wait to get to the Rendezvous because this past year might have been one of my favorites that we've released in a few years. And so I get super excited. It returns me back to some of, the first time drinking it. But we had such success and such great feedback when we launched Rendezvous that we were kind of like, what if we make something? I always talk about it like, what if we spinal tap the situation? What if we just turn that dial up and make the rye-iest of ryes, which I realize is not a word, but I like to say it because it's truly what we did. It's a dual rye mash bill, so straight rye aged between 2 and 9 years. We fluctuate. Previous years on batches have been up to 7 years. Typically with rye whiskey, you don't like to go too old in the aging process because rye just is, she's spunky. She's got a lot of spice. She's got some bite to her. And so that particular grain matures at a younger age. So you're getting really, really young, fresh, bright rye mixed in here. And that was that's what double rye was about. Also the biggest difference, so the mash bills on these are going to be the same when you get from double rye to Rendezvous. And I encourage you, if you have extra glassware, try them side by side so you can kind of pick out some of those differences and nuances. So we're doing a MGP mash bill. You can see there it's 95% rye, 5% barley. So almost exclusively rye. And then from High West, this is where you're starting to get into some of our distillate. You're getting 80% rye. And what is unique is you're getting 20% malted rye. So malted rye, you don't really hear that often. You do with barley, but not really with rye. That sweetens it a little bit, but you're only, in the whole blend, it's a pretty, it's a fairly small percentage overall. So I would still say double rye has a lot of bite, a lot of structure. Great, for double rye, definitely a shorter finish than comparatively to Rendezvous, but also this is going to be more column still coming from MGP blended in versus when you get to Rendezvous, that's going to be more of our copper pot distillate. So it's going to be more robust flavors. It's a little bit older. What you're tasting in the double rye on the older side is more of the High West distillate there. This is, to me, a phenomenal everyday drinker. I love it. It's great in cocktails. You can do a lot with it. Or you can drink it, straight up, which I also enjoy. And for me, one of my favorite things, on the palate about it, apart from the traditional, cinnamon and clove and those baking spices you get, is more of that herbaceousness. So I love like the mint or the eucalyptus that kind of come out, a little bit of dill. So those herbs to me are really fun, very expressive. But with that, we'll continue to sip. Let me know what you guys think. Oh, we already got a Rendezvous lover. I see that. Same here. She's near and dear to my heart. Anyone? Bueller?
I do get like the black licorice and the cinnamon a lot.
Mhm.
I don't think the double rye is as peppery as other ryes. Like you were saying, it's more herby. I think I agree.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what turned me off traditionally of ryes was that like very overwhelming, pepperiness, very just almost it dried out the palate. I think we all know what I'm talking about. It's like some of those, it's just, you're kind of like, oh wow, I there's not enough to chew on. It's not a great mouth feel sometimes. Because rye, you think, I always describe whiskey like, think of bourbon a little more like your sourdough bread versus rye bread, so it's got a very distinct flavor profile. It's a very distinct grain, and it's a cheaper grain, which is why it's used in a lot of whiskeys, American whiskeys in particular. I think that's what I love so much about double rye and even Rendezvous is it just doesn't have that overwhelming characteristic. And the more you get with Rendezvous, that finish is even longer. It's just full of flavor. And to me, just bursting with personality. And, but this one I really love too for mixing. I love to do really great cocktails where it's going to shine. It's the modifiers, the mixers aren't going to overpower the whiskey. You're still going to get that essence through it and taste the spirit. And it's really going to elevate the cocktail. And that's kind of what this was designed for. Is we wanted that everyday drinker. We wanted the one you can sip on. You can certainly shoot double rye, but it's also great for bartenders and putting in your classic cocktails. But if you want to get, fun and innovative, as a lot of folks have, double rye has a lot of personality that you can play with unique ingredients that maybe ordinarily you wouldn't think to pair with whiskeys, particularly rye whiskey.
Yeah, I think the double rye is super fun for shaken drinks in particular. I think it does really well with like lemon and herbs more than other ryes, I think, because it has that herbaceousness that isn't super present in others. And I really love that about her. I really do. And also you can totally sip her on a rock and she does great too. Still very structured the way you want a rye to be. So I love that about her.
It's Bianca and I talk about our spirit, my spirit babies. Sometimes they take a masculine profile, but sometimes I'm like, she's just beautiful.
It's true.
So I start to give them personalities and personas, and I'm pretty sure people think I've got like 10 heads and I'm crazy, but I love it so much. And it really, when you love what when you're passionate and you love it, obviously it does take on a whole world of its own. Tim, yes to the gin, which is funny because obviously we've made a gin and we just made another one that's distillery only. It's up from our lab series. Again, we're liking to get funky. In fact, when you ask Isaac and Brendan, I haven't asked Tara this actually, but when you ask them what they like to drink or what they think is very interesting, they answer with gin. So obviously they love whiskey, but they find gin very fascinating and have been playing with that more and more. Clearly we have a thing for botanicals and complex flavors. So really, really exciting to see what could come from the distillery on a large scale moving forward.
Hey, Becky, forgive me if I've missed an obvious answer to this, but I understand like why a double oaked bourbon is called double oaked because of the, the process, but what's the concept behind the name double rye?
A double rye mash bill. So 2 straight ryes blended together.
Okay, so I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we used to, let's see, actually you can see it on, well, I don't know if you guys can see it, but if you have a bottle of an older double rye before we did the label change in 2022, it used to be double rye. Let's see if I can get the light on it with an exclamation point. And that was just emphasis on, we wanted it to be, a spicy, bright, spunky rye. And we just thought the exclamation point just really, enunciated that. We've dropped it. So some of our publications, you'll still see double rye with the exclamation, the new bottling, new packaging, they left it off. That made me a little sad. I always love to talk about that story and just being like, we put, again, rye-est of ryes, which is a mouthful to say, especially after a few drinks, but I've practiced. Any other questions, comments before we continue our journey here? Oopsies. I didn't mean to click over. I was looking to see if there was anything in the chat, but there we go. Guess not. So while you're continuing to sip, and we're going to get into rendezvous here, and you can obviously go ahead and start trying and doing comparative. I like to talk about, obviously where we started, talked about the saloon and our expansion to our now fully functional massive distillery. We also have what we call the refectory, which is where we do our kitchen, our culinary program, our general store, tasting rooms. Honestly, we have such a beautiful property. We've gotten really busy with events. You can get married there. You can have corporate events. We're situated up there on Blue Sky Ranch, which is already an incredibly luxurious property. We have been very fortunate to be part of their land and overlooking the Wanship Mountains, which is just about 30 minutes north of Park City. The good news is if you go in prime winter time to ski or snowboard, they keep those roads clear. They do a shuttle. So you are able to go to the distillery even, in maybe not a blizzard, but in pretty harsh conditions, you're able to still go up to High West thanks to Blue Sky because they're shuttling folks back and forth. So obviously our downtown Park City location, and I'll talk about the significance of our structure and why it looks like that. But this is where, we started with, again, calling back to that 250-gallon copper pot still. It's actually still in there. You can see it behind a plate of glass. If you're going in, there's a general store, basically right behind those neon lights you see in the picture. And then, you can go in there. There's bar service. It's only 12 seats. During super busy season, there is a line quite literally out the door. I don't know in this picture. Let's see if you can see it. Yeah, so you can see, I don't know if you'll see my cursor, but you can see the lift that comes right up here. There's actually a slope, a trail that's called Quittin' Time. And it is the first we are the first ski in, ski out gastropub in the United States. So you're having a fun day on the slopes, you do Quittin' Time, it'll pop you out right here on 7th and Park. And then you can just, clip out of your, pop out of your bindings and pop into the saloon, which you probably won't make it back to the mountains after you've had a few, pours of High West. But a little background. So a little story on this, you're probably looking at it, and apart from the barrels out front and seeing in neon the High West, you don't really see anything else with our branding. When we were renovating, this, this building has a lot of history. So once upon a time, it was a horse livery. So this is where they would take the horses, house them, they would put their shoes on them and get them ready, to hitch them to wagons and carts and things of that nature. Obviously, as automobiles were created and manufacturing became bigger, the livery shut down and this transformed into an automotive garage. They had painted over the sign, so you can kind of see some remnants as National Garage, some things under there. They had also, again, it had evolved over time as well and been just, as most people do, you just keep painting over it, right? Well, unfortunately, there was a huge fire just like right across the street, and it was so intense that the heat melted off some of the paint, like starting to show some of the original artwork and branding there. And we loved it, and we loved the story there. When we had bought the property and were renovating, the team, some of the original team members that were there doing the cleanup and doing, they were taking out floorboards and stuff like that. It's really cool to hear. But we all obviously knew it was going to be a Mountain West, and High West was already the name. We hadn't designed a logo yet. And someone, took a crowbar and they popped open one of the floorboards and they found a horseshoe from the original horse livery, and it was face up. So I don't know, I'm from the South, I don't know if you guys know, but horseshoes, especially when they're face up, are a sign of good luck. So they found it, and it just kind of like everybody, as they tell the story, is just like, yeah, this is it. This is our logo. This is who we are. So you can see just above the High West Saloon, that's our very modified logo, with the horseshoe upright with a mountain in the background, silhouette of a mountain with the HW, almost like if you were going to get branded or something like on a ranch. So it just kind of, it kind of tethered everything together and really brought it home. This is a phenomenal property for us. It's still like people, goodness, they cram in there. They don't take reservations. So it really is, time it right, or be very patient. Also, when we do bottle releases, you can purchase from either the Park City location at the saloon or up at the distillery. So we'll have lines, people camp out, especially for midwinters. They'll camp out for a while. This is just a little insight into the dining space. You can see the bar back there. Like I said, we only have room for 12. They will not let you crowd around it. Those are Utah laws. So that's our saloon. Anybody been there? I can't see everybody, but maybe either say hey or pop into the chat. Just like a penny. That's cute. Exactly. And I think we've had some pretty good luck.
I was there back in 2016.
Oh, okay. You were there right after we opened. Did you go up to the One Ship Distillery, the main location?
No, I didn't. No,
Okay.
I just hung out in downtown and hit your stuff there.
Okay. What'd you think of it, of the saloon?
I liked it. I found interesting. I ordered like a 4 taster flight, and I could only be served 2 at a time because liquor laws. I was born in Salt Lake, grew up there. I remember all the weird laws my parents went through. Like they sit at a table, they bring the mix in a drink glass, and they bring a little mini bottle, and my parents had to make their own drinks because of all the crazy laws. So
yeah, I've heard, I've been there and visited, and it's so funny, again, I grew up in the South, so we also have our fun and strange rules and regulations. But going out there and just thinking, you think once upon a time you can only have 2% beer, like ABV. I think they've upped it now to like, I don't know, 3.5. Like you think breweries, they make their actual beer, and then they make their Utah beer. So that's why I say like it's incredible that we're making, our lowest proof is High Country at 88. And, then we just come out with a cash drink that's, almost 120. And so we hit everything in between. It's unreal. But you're absolutely right. We do limit, and even at the tasting rooms, they're legally not, they have the stoppers, on like the pour.
Yeah.
So even if they wanted to pour more, they can't.
Nope.
Oh, mini, yes, Tony. I remember the mini bottles. I mean, I was too young to drink, but I remember the like airplane bottles. Could you imagine what a nuisance? Like they had to crack one of those every time to pour and make a cocktail. Granted, I don't think they were making cocktails per se, probably just mixed drinks, but
And the other thing in South Carolina, you couldn't sell liquor in a mix on the same side of a building.
yeah, we there is one location I remember they shared a wall, but obviously, I mean, to this day, you can't still have them together like that unless it's a true like ABC package store. But there was a place where there was like a window and they would like slide like slide something through. Totally not legal, but I remember seeing that and I was like, this is so bizarre. And now I live in California where, my liquor's next to chips, which is perfect. I can go to CVS and buy a bottle of High West. I'm like, oh, well, no, I can't. That's totally wrong. But the theory there, I can buy a bottle of whiskey, at the drugstore is just incredible. Oh, Elijah, you went during COVID. I would imagine, I mean, I'm glad you got to experience when it's not all crazy, but also, we did, I think it was a Constellation, not just Constellation, but obviously the Times, that obviously had very strict regulations, and we didn't start bringing back full distillery tours until I think it was late 2021, if I'm not mistaken, or like maybe sometime in 2021. So they and you still had to wear a mask. Obviously, you go there if you do the full distillery tour, you got to wear those awesome safety glasses. We are doing chemistry and around the fermentation vats and our copper pot still and everything. But yeah, what a time. So glad we're beyond that now, but glad virtual tastings and things like this came of it. With that note, we're going to move over to Rendezvous. If you haven't already, pour you some. Shame on me as my favorite one, which is probably why I don't have one handy. I probably drank it all. It's the one out of this whole collection that's not sitting here. So I just moved apartments. I'm sure it's in a bag or a box somewhere. But you guys enjoy that for me. It's definitely, I mean, I already told you, like, this is the one that made me fall in love with rye. So, obviously very near and dear to my heart. I touched on it, what makes it, special, compared to the double rye. But this was our flagship whiskey. This was our first bottling and our first release in 2007 after we launched the distillery. At the time, it was completely sourced and blended. And there was, I'm sure everybody has thoughts and feels over that, that, oh, you're not making your own whiskey. We do work with MGP. They make damn good, rye distillate. And we're very, very lucky to be one of their first, who's become a more major player. But obviously they source for, or they distill for a lot of folks, but we actually work with them. That's the difference of contract sourcing, is we actually work hand in hand to tell them what we want, what our specs were. So that 95.5 rye and malted barley mash bill is very standard for us. We've had that from the get. We also used to partner with Barton. Back in the day, whether it was with the rye or the bourbon, we've partnered with a few distilleries, some out of Kentucky. So it's really cool if you have or if you find older bottles of Rendezvous, which is much tougher these days. But to see the evolution of it. We are now, as we're getting older, we're getting more juice under our belt, really great juice as we've become master distillers in our own right. And we're making some really, really great whiskey. So when we expanded up in Wanship, we have a custom made 1,700 gallon copper pot still. So if you think we started with our little bitty baby, 250 gallon, now we're at 1,700. Our capacity increased exponentially just at the distillery itself, our fermentation vats, our blending, and then our aging warehouses. We could produce more. So that's expanded. We obviously, people always ask us, oh, are you going to stop sourcing? And I keep getting the answer from production team of no, we have no intention to stop those partnerships. It's core to who we are. It's our story. I think as far as a continuity and flavor profile, it's really important to keep, those, that consistency and what people recognize. But what I will say is we are putting more of our own copper pot still in the spirits, especially with Rendezvous. This one is older skewing. So this year's batch was 4 to 10 years. In previous batches, it might be 4 to 9. But we're starting to get some more of that older juice. Again, copper pot distillation, vastly different than column still. So just those interactions within the still are going to create more flavor compounds, producing just more robust, more complex flavor that's really great for long-term aging. So the way it's going to interact with the barrel. But with all that, you've now had both, hopefully. I'd love to hear you guys, your thoughts and opinions. I feel like a lot of people, you could love double rye, but typically Rendezvous is just like, oh, this is more of that sipper, that it's gonna linger, and she entices you to continue to have a little bit more. And with that, I get to check the chat box here.
Yeah,
All I saw was Flaming Hot Cheetos. Sorry. And I was like, what did I miss? Go ahead, Wade.
Yeah, I like them both. I'd rather just sip on Rendezvous, and I use double rye. I do have a couple bottles of double rye, and I use that for mixers.
Yeah, great. Ooh, 2017 Rendezvous. Eric, do you still have that bottle? Maybe.
Sorry. No, the 2017 lasted about a week.
Fair enough.
And I've seen a couple pop up from here to there, and they go so fast. It's just so good.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously gotten to I don't know how long ago that was, but I would be curious what you think about this batch, because in my opinion, not that I didn't love, kind of the around, the 2020 or so, but I really think the 2023, this latest release, last May, just beautiful flavor, great complex, like, this took me back. I would say my first year of drinking, Rendezvous honestly might have been around 2015, 2016. Like kind of around that point that you're talking about. And without having them to compare, directly, but in my memory, this kind of like transported me back to that place. So
good. So good.
Oh, someone has an Act 7 left. I have a few places that bars around here that have been stashing. They've just been accumulating over the years different variations and different acts of midwinters. And I've had recently Act 1, Act 2. I think we skipped 3. I had a 4 and a 6. I'm not sure if I've actually had 7, Tony. I've done for sure 9, 10, 11. I have Encore. I actually have a little bit left. I really need to just enough to tease us all, but a little bit of the Encore that we did last year. I really enjoyed this past year's Rendezvous. For those of you that don't know, midwinter, the base is Rendezvous. So we take the Rendezvous rye, and then we finish that in port and ruby tawny and ruby port barrels. And it's exquisite. I would say, honestly, tonight might be the night I reopened the 2010, the Act 10. It was a decade of producing midwinter. We can talk about it at the end. I do have a slide. But I really loved Encore when we did it. And then we released Prisoner Share for the first time, like just a couple of weeks after. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know which one I love more. This year, just having the midwinter Act 11, probably because I love the Rendezvous so much from this batch, it was so incredible. Like the moment I popped that first bottle and just smelt it, I was like, oh, this is a good one. I'm never home, so probably why I have way too much back there, but 2 ounces of the Midwinter Act 5 Scene 4 with a Blanton stopper. All right. Love the cross collaboration there. Any more thoughts, feels, opinions on the Rendezvous? keep this train a moving. Well, since we talked about Rendezvous and I've teased, the distillery, this is a nice beauty shot of as you walk in. So you kind of obviously behind where it says distillery and refectory, but we've got some nice water features, the mountains obviously in the background. But you have the distillery and the refectory, and you kind of just walk up there, that ramp into the whole facility. Very, very intentionally and well done. They definitely left no detail unnoticed. Here's another angle from that walking bridge as you go in there. So you have the tasting room. So this is actually the refectory. On the other side of the bridge is the distillery. Again, you wear your safety goggles and you get to tour around. You see all the chemistry at play. All the fermentation vats. We actually have a huge bridge because our copper pot still is so massive. And it was custom made and hand hammered, and you can actually see where they welded it together once they transported it in there. Like so many that are custom made. And then you can see where they hammered that copper to put it in place. So we actually built walking bridges around it. So you can be at the top of the fermentation vats. Obviously, that's more mechanical and, it's efficient for us as we check on things. But then you can come around and then you'll see, and you're right where on the piece of the still where you can, you have all of your, so we've got obviously a hybrid there that comes off of it. So we have some of those plates that we can pull off, and that's, really where the team is looking and making those cuts. But on this side, what you're looking at is just gorgeous. The tasting room is in there. The general store is in there, which is our, obviously can go buy merch, you can buy bottles when we release midwinter and Boo Rye and special releases and stuff like that. You can get it there. And then in the back is just these massive ceiling to floor windows overlooking the scenery, while you're having a very, nice meal, tasting experiences, pairings. Something we started doing at High West is we paired with Ritual chocolate, and you can opt for a reserve tasting and do some of the limited releases paired with chocolate, which is really quite a treat. So love that experience if you're there. If you want something super bespoke and VIP, we also have Nelson's Cottage, which is in Park City, just down from the saloon. I'll go back to this. You'll see it's the last one. We can host up to 12 people. Typically we do those. It's like either a prefix menu or honestly like a chef tasting menu, which is a really awesome, super VIP experience. So got some cool stuff going on up there. Before I launch into high country, apple pie with cinnamon on the finish. Yes, definitely. Love Prisoners. How to Dream. Have the older midwinter, not the Act 11 yet. I highly recommend, if you can find any midwinter in the wild, the Act 11, I highly recommend it. It took me back to some of the previous acts. And it's just really good. It's nice to see some of the feedback we had gotten was, it tastes different, or what are you guys doing different? And sometimes it's just a element of sourcing. It's how the grain, was for that crop. And we have to make changes. Also, you think about, we do a pretty wide range of years. So sometimes might have been skewing a little bit younger depending on supply, and having to try and, as Isaac likes to say, there's a swim lane, right? And that's your flavor profile. That's what you're aiming for. Sometimes you get a little flavor drift, you get out of the swim lane. But we've been very fortunate as we've been making our own whiskey, we get to influence that flavor profile. So if what we're getting from our partners isn't necessarily what we're used to or what we have been working with, we can adjust and we can start to blend. That is, I talk about it, distillation is the science, blending is the art. You're cooking a meal, you have all your raw ingredients, and, they have distinctive profiles in their own right. But what you put together, how you make that dish, or if cooking's not your thing, painting, I always talk about, I don't know why I grew up with watching Bob Ross, but I always think about how he had his palette of colors, and he started with just like a few, just blobs. And then he blended them together to create pastels and shades of green to make his happy trees. And I'm like, that's what blending is, and you get to be creative. You get to play with that outcome and really influence it. And that's why I talk about blending. obviously very important in making Scotch and all of these wonderful blends that, you know, have just really set a precedent. When you think our two production managers and who are running the facility, you know, came from Edinburgh. They've worked with some of these really influential folks in Scotch industry. They're bringing those techniques over here. And I think that that's really unique and something special and a calling card for us at High West. Speaking of something that's really near and dear to us and unique to us is High Country. I love this one. I call it a warm hug in a glass because I think it's just delightful. Speaking of Scotch and, you know, just all the notes that you know, when we're talking about whether it's a single malt, whether it's a blend, you know, whether it's a single grain whiskey, etc. It's always, you know, peated from the Highlands, whatever, it doesn't matter. They're all so intriguing, right? So reflective of that terroir, unique styles. Scotch has, you can customize those stills any which way, which really impact the flavor and the aging process there. But inspired by James' great grandfather, he was the master distiller at Rochester Distilling, which made American single malt. A love, you know, of the land and the history there. And then bringing on Brendan with a talent and a training from Scotland. We have our American single malt, High Country. This one is, I feel like a lot of folks don't know about High Country. And then as soon as they taste it, they're like, how, like, holy cow, how did I not know about this? Especially for, you know, Scotch drinkers. So we do, this is the only product currently, well, not the only one, but the only one that's nationally released, I should say, because we just released a bottled in bond. But this is 100% High West distillate. So sourced and made, blended and aged all at High West Distillery. It's 100% malt for the base, but we actually use a unique tri-malt you can see on the screen there. So we have our traditional base, and then we also do a unique caramel and chocolate. So it kind of gives it, just really enhances some of those, you know, cereal notes, the oats and toastiness, which is probably why I say it's a little, you know, just a nice hints of sweetness. You've got some good barrel contact, and it just, it really just wraps around you. It coats the palate, and I just think it's a nice little liquid hug. Anybody else? Black sesame, truffle. Well, and I don't know about you guys, but I love truffle, so I'm right there with you. Earthy, yeah. There's just a, I feel like I could probably sit here all night calling out all the different like notes and flavors. Just this is one that just keeps on giving, and it's nice that it comes out in December. I will also let you guys know this is the last year, at least for now, that High Country will be nationally available. So starting this December when we release it, it's going to be a distillery and probably Utah only release. So you'll have to get, so savor it while you can. I'm still finding this at many stores. I know within our distributor partner, they have a lot in inventory. So definitely if you're enjoying it or are intrigued and want to try more, I encourage you to go find a bottle because I'm not sure the next time you'll have easy access to it. Where is Amanda? Where is Remedy? I'm not sure if I'm familiar with them.
It's in Glendale.
Oh,
I was just there to pick up another bottle and I saw it.
Oh, okay.
But I was being good. I'm like, no, I'm only here for one bottle that I've already paid for. And I'm here to pick up.
That's how they get you.
Now you have to go back. I walked through the store saying, I'm just gonna get this bottle. I'm just picking up my bottle. I'm just picking up my bottle. I'm not gonna look at anything.
I love that. That's
like right near the register. I'm like, oh look.
Oh, okay. I know I will say folks that carry High West, we have a, you know, they're typically pretty good supporters. So I feel like we've got enough marks that we get some substantial floor spacing, you know, and some cool racks and displays. I have a feeling, you know, the more I tell people that this is going to be rolling back this year, I've done a few consumer events recently where folks have been like, where can I get, like, I haven't had this before. It's kind of, you know, if you know, you know. And then those that just, they know us for our rye, they know midwinter, they know campfire. They're like, wait, I didn't know you were making a single malt. So it's been a really fun one to share that story. And you'll also notice it is one of our lower proof. It's still 88, so it's not completely low and 80 proof, but this is out of our whole lineup going to be the lowest proof, mostly because it's that malt base. You want to keep it, you know, you want to keep it, it's just more, it's just lighter grain. You know, it's more sensitive when you're sprouting that malt, you're getting that green out from the bran. And so you're not necessarily working with like a grain that you're then cooking and missing. So it's a whole just different grain, different material, which is why you get some of those nice toasty cereal notes. That's why it's can be so smooth and so elegant and clean. So we typically do this at a lower proof. I typically mention this sooner, and I'm so sorry I didn't, but bourbon, double rye, rendezvous, campfire are all done at 92 proof. We do not use chill filtration. So we believe we want, you know, a lot of the flavors that we're all talking about and that we're all picking up on and enjoy are in those, you know, in the good fats, you know, the oils and some of the acids in there, fatty compounds. And when you use chill filtration, you can tend to, and I don't want to, you know, assume that everybody knows it, but also don't want to assume that anybody doesn't. But basically it's, you know, I always relate it to like ramen or noodles or something. You know, you have it, it's nice and mixed and yummy, and then you go to put it in your fridge and you reheat it for the next day, and you see how all of that has solidified at the top, right? So basically for chill filtration and spirits, they will do that to kind of pull out some of the haziness or cloudiness in the spirit. So they will cut off the top of that. So they'll drop down the temperature, it'll separate, and they'll get it. Well, what happens is you've now you've pulled out all of those flavor compounds, all those flavonoids that give it its essence, you know, that you really love, that it's taken from the grains, taken from the wood and melded together. So we believe that, you know, if you distill at a certain proof, so for us, 92 is our distiller's proof and what we go to. So we don't need to do a chill filtration. We still have a beautiful liquid, but it's keeping all of that intact. So that's something for us. I also have a slide that's next about a little more about our sustainability and our process. I see this is the kids' dram. I don't know about that. Who's the kid?
Becky, I might have missed this. Is the High Country, is that done in virgin oak or in used barrels?
It's actually a combination. So we have new oak, but also a little bit of used.
Okay. Because it's got a lot of my usual interpretation of a virgin oak barrel. So I was kind of curious, and I don't know if I'd missed that somewhere. So thank you.
I'd have to double check. That's a great question. I want to say it's 90-10, but don't hold me to that on it. But we do a second use barrel as well. So yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And you did not miss that. I did not mention it. So great question, and appreciate that. This is, I mean, and anybody else that has questions or something I haven't addressed, just like, oh, all right, Elijah, we got you covered. A little bit about High West, how we make things, how we operate. I had already told you that sustainability is very big to who we are. We love our community. We want to protect the community and the land that has given us so much. We want to put back into it. So I won't read all of this off of the page, but it just kind of gives you a snapshot of all the innovative technology and equipment that we've put in to our systems to create a rather sustainable spirit that's not necessarily sucking the life out of the land and putting pollutants out. Obviously, one of your biggest outputs from distillation is CO2. So we actually we don't use a lot of carbon there to trying to keep that down in our carbon footprint. Other thing that I love hearing them talk about at the distillery is taking care of like that spent worse, like, you know, basically the distiller's beer. Anything that doesn't get used in the still, actually we give to some local farmers for their cows as like feed, and they call them their happy cows. It's really cute. I mean, they've, you know, they're getting a little buzz, so of course they're going to be a little happier, they're going to be a little lighter. But it's really cool that we partner with some of our local, local farmers for all of our rye that we source. We don't do anything for our own distillate that's more than a day's drive. So we are sourcing from anywhere that we can get to within the day and supporting that local community. I feel like we're really big into nature. You can't have a distillery nestled in the mountains without being really in love with the land and respecting the land. So it's really cool just to hear all the techniques. And I will say Constellation as a whole is a huge part of our ethos. So our wineries, most of our distilleries are either certified organic, have biodynamic farming practices, regenerative farming, are recycling. We're with one of our distilleries in Louisville. We're close to being the first distillery with a closed loop water system, being right off the river. So we're doing a lot of great things for the land that, you know, sometimes you get so caught up on the story of the brand, the history, or the juice itself. We forget all these things that go into it, and making spirits sometimes maybe isn't the healthiest. So we're doing everything we can to kind of like neutralize that and give back. Apart from just environmental, consciousness, we also, like I said, the community side of things. So you can see 3 foundations that we are really committed to. We've pledged $1 million by 2025. So next year, it's coming up fast, that we will have donated to these 3 charities. So you have the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. Obviously, being here in Southern California, or California in general, we understand wildfires and the impacts that they have, the folks that keep us safe fighting those. So as we roll into campfire, we like to say, drink campfire, don't start one. So proceeds of that do go to that foundation. A really big one for us is Protect Our Winters, which is just honestly a ton of, influencers, Epicureans, just lovers of the land that want to, keep our winters intact, and do what we can to just really protect the West, as you see up there. And then we kind of touched on this with the switch from American Prairie Bourbon to just High West Bourbon. But in fact, even though if we've taken it off the label, 10% of proceeds of every bottle of bourbon sold still go to the American Prairie Reserve in Northeast Montana. So that is actually growing. I think by the end of its completion, it is going to be the largest nature preserve in the continental United States, which is really awesome. They've restored land. They've brought back some native animals and creatures there. So we're really, really proud to be part of that. Which is just a great time for our last mark, and then we can just talk about whatever and be more conversational if you guys like. I don't know about y'all, but this one gets me jazzed. I mean, I'm sure I've said that about every one of them, but campfire is super cool, very special, and hella unique. We were the first ones to do a tri-blend of bourbon, rye, and peated Scotch, which on paper probably sounds like weird. I'm sure some heads were scratched when Dave and Jane came back from Scotland and were like, we've got an idea, guys. We want to try this. And actually, it almost didn't happen. So the story on this guy is Dave and Jane were on vacation, being the ever world travel, or just travelers in general that they are. And they were down in Isla and enjoying vacation. And they were actually at, I think they went to a few, but they're actually at a B&B near Brulati. And they were having breakfast that morning before they went out, and they smelt the peat cooking, and they had a little bit of the brown sugar and a little sweetness coming through, and their palates, their noses, everything were just kind of intrigued, what are you guys doing? So they talked to the kitchen staff and they were like, oh, well, you know, one of our cooks is preparing for tonight's dinner. They were actually cooking the peat and caramelizing that with some brown sugar, making, and they were like, well, actually, I think it was, you have to come back for dinner and see it. So they did come back for dinner. They asked the kitchen, what is that? What did you use it for? And it was for dessert for dinner. And they did a honeydew melon with a peated brown sugar glaze, like little honey drizzle. And so you think about all those wonderful flavors. So you have the sweet melon, you know, a little hint of citrus, but mostly just really juicy fruit. And then you have the sweetness of the brown sugar, the caramelization, a little bit of honey in there. And then you have the smokiness, the underlying texture of that peat shining through. And they just were like, this is delicious. This is phenomenal, overwhelming of flavor in unique ways, but not in a bad way. And they were like, we need to do something with this. It reminded them of bourbon. It reminded them of some of the spiciness of rye and the cinnamon, you know, those beautiful baking spices, but obviously the peat coming through, that delicious Scotch, you know, Isla Scotch shining through. And Dave, being ever the innovator, was like, we got to do this. We got to do this. We're going to be the first to do it. And again, I'm sure I could only imagine the team when he got back there and said, hey, we're going to work on this. They were probably like, you've lost your mind, sir. This has never been done. These are very can be overpowering flavors, right? So we do have a proprietary blend of this, and I will break down the mash bill that you have for this current release, which is honestly one of the best campfires I've had in a few years. It's definitely a little bit of peated Scotch from an undisclosed distillery, again, due to contractual obligations. But then you're going to have the bourbon mash bill that you guys have had. So it's going to be that dual mash bill, obviously in the bourbon component. And then this year, the campfire component was 100% High West distillate. So you're getting that 80-20, you know, 80 rye, 20% malted rye from the copper pot still, a little bit older, more robust. So I think those flavors, those powers combined have brought us a really delicious campfire. What do you guys think? This always gets such fun reactions and feedback, so I'm always curious to hear. I'm also gonna pour some. Anyone? Stroke of genius. Yes, Bianca, exactly. Oh, Tony, this is what got you into High West. All right. Oh, and Elijah as well. What was do you guys remember the year on the release that you guys remember drinking campfire?
It was because you cut it out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it was prior to that, maybe 2013s, maybe somewhere around there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you guys are drinking the 2023. I have a bottle of 2020 in my locker at $7,000. I have a 2018, a 2021. So I've kind of tasted at least the last few years. I've definitely had some small tasters of some older years. I tend to really enjoy the ones from like 2015, 16, 17, 8, like that bubble of time. Not knocking the vintage again. Wow, I keep saying vintages, but the years after, the batches after, not knocking them because they were still delicious. But I think they, from my palate, were a little softer, a little, you know, like less on that. You know, you open a bottle of campfire and it's so aptly named. You know, you smell that peat right off the top. And I felt in some ways it might have been, you know, just kind of trying to find that right word, but it was just lessened a little bit. You know, you still got the nose, but the flavor, the finish was just a little softer, a little rounder. Tasting and doing a side-by-side comparison of some of those years, this 2023 batch that we released in August it took me back. And again, it just to me, and tasting these and being a follower and a fan, it just shows you that more of our own distillate is, we're imparting that flavor. We're controlling our own destiny in that way, if you will. And it's bringing back the oomph, the things that people fell in love with High West. And it's nice to see that, like, that's coming from our own, you know, our own distillate, and blending it in there more. I really love this past year's, very, I don't know what you, if this is anyone's first time tasting this year's campfire?
This is my first campfire ever.
Oh, what do you think?
Well, everybody will laugh because I am not a rye fan. There's so much going on flavor wise with this that it's actually kind of entertaining to drink it and try and figure out which part of it I'm reacting to.
Well, that's what makes it so fun, is that you just go back for another sip, you let it breathe a little bit. You could honestly, with this, you could add a couple of drops of water and let that kind of pull out some more flavor notes, and really see, you know, that's what I love about whiskey and even wine is, you know, especially the more complex, the more age and interactions, is that first sip, the second, the third, until you're done, can all be a little bit different. They're all building on each other. You're also tasting campfire after you've had, you know, however many others, 5 others. So you're building on quite a tasting block there.
No, I thought it was really interesting because the peated portion is what really hit me first. And as it sat in the glass and opened up a little bit, it's kind of softened up into, I'm getting the sweetness from the bourbon, but it's still got that spice in the background from the rye. So it's such a complex flavor. It's really quite fascinating.
I agree. I'm also seeing in here what batch you guys had. 23 F08. I'm not too far off, you guys. I have an FO, I think it's an F01. It could be a P. No, it's an F. It's like very faded. Clearly I've picked up this.
Vintage.
Yeah, vintage. Like cringing at myself, switching
No,
gears
but
from wine to
also-
whiskey. Not mad about it, but definitely.
You know what? This spirit is so beautiful to drink on its own. And after Becky introduced me to a campfire espresso martini, I was like, oh, I guess I'll never be the same. So if you haven't tried that or requested it at your bar, I really think you should. It's a totally different experience. I really love it for both reasons.
I have to say on that note, cowboy coffee, make it happen.
Oh, right.
I'm telling you, if you don't have campfire, if you're not, it's not, you know, jiving for your palate and you're more of like in the bourbon or the rye train. If you find one of, even if you find the bourbon or the double rye, don't do your typical espresso martini with vodka, or do if you love that, but try it with a whiskey base. You talk about, someone had mentioned earlier, like not quite espresso, but some of those like similar notes in that direction. It really just plays all of that together. And then, you know, to expand on that, campfire, when you do it with the espresso, depending on how it's made, it is quite literally like a toasted, you know, coffee marshmallow, you know, delightfulness.
All the good things.
And I'm a big fan. Obviously, I spread the whiskey gospel all the time, but I talk about cowboy coffee quite often. Love a little pick me up. I just do want to reiterate, because Tony, you had mentioned, you know, like we had stopped it and changes. I do want to be very, very clear and open that we did pull back. We pulled back Rendezvous. We had pulled back Campfire. They were seasonal limited releases, still nationally. And so you could only find, a lot of people thought we had just stopped making it for a while, like the last few years. And you could only find bourbon and double rye, you know, at your bar, at your retail, your bottle shop. And then, you know, Campfire was like, why is it so expensive? Or like, we can't find it anymore. Last year, after we released them, Rendezvous traditionally was released in May, Campfire in August. We brought them back as your best of the West is what we're calling it, but your core whiskeys as they used to be. So now you guys can go out with full confidence and you can go and find bourbon, double rye, Rendezvous, and Campfire year-round national releases. Midwinter will still be a limited release, small production on that. Last year we did make more than we ever had before. So that's nice that we're able to up the capacity a little bit. Saw someone mention the Prisoner's Share, which I'll touch on. That was a 2-year collaboration, so you won't see that one again, at least not anytime soon. We have a new collaboration that will be a new 2-year series with our sister distillery, Casa Noble Tequila down in Jalisco, which is an organic tequila, doing beautiful, beautiful work. And the master tequilero there is just incredible. So we're super excited to see the blend of bourbon and rye in our Marquez barrels, which is a blend of 21 unique Blue Weber añejos and extra añejos aged 1 to 5 years. So it's going to be aged in that. So super, super exciting there to be released in November. Boo Rye is a distillery in Utah only release in February. And then we did a bottled in bond for the first time. And starting next year, that will be a national release. I know I'd mentioned we played around in our lab series with Jen. We've done vodka before, flavored vodkas. So I just think the future is very bright for High West and what's to come. And hopefully you guys are enjoying this newest batch last year that came out and what we're still producing as much as I have. I'm just reading I'm catching up on the comments here after my spiel, and I'm seeing something about high country breakfast and whiskey and waffles, and now I'm hungry and I want breakfast. This is amazing.
Breakfast for dinner is definitely amazing.
Yeah, what you missed was when you started talking about the cowboy coffee, I'm like, I know what I'm having for breakfast. It started the whole thing.
You gotta start your day off right.
Damn, Skippy.
Yes. I know we've kind of touched on this. I can send you guys this deck to share out. I do encourage you guys, if you're loving High West, whether you're new to it or you've been following us, we do have a whiskey club. Unfortunately, we can't ship to California, but there are other states we can. But you kind of are the first ones to know about events happening, special invites, our release parties at the distillery. So if you just get an itching to go out to Park City, you'll kind of see what's happening and what we're working on. This is a nice little photo of Shaun White last fall, like I would say fall, early winter. 3 times gold medal winner, X Games champion, philanthropist, all around good guy. Shaun White decided to partner up with Protect Our Winters and High West to be our brand ambassador. So he loves High West, which is it was a natural pairing. But we're super lucky to have him on board and help, continue the awareness and to protect the mountains that clearly he loves so much. And him being a SoCal guy is really awesome. That how involved he wants to be. And he just, it was kind of like a limited partnership. And then we just found out about a month ago that he wants to stay on board and do more with us. So we're super, super stoked to have him a part of the High West fam. And then follow us on Instagram. It's Drink High West. We do Whiskey Wednesday every Wednesday on our stories. They answer questions straight from the distillery. So anything that you didn't learn today that you want to know further, there's still time to ask. I may or may not know it, but you have folks right from the distillery that can answer those things. Here we are going to talk a little bit about some of our releases, just to put it on your radar. If you find yourself, out at the distillery or in Utah, Boo Rye, one of my favorites. I already told you about this cheeky little fella. This is a blend of straight bourbon and rye whiskeys. This is aged for a minimum of 10 years. We used to do Son of Boo Rye, which was the same sort of blend, but it was 5 years. So both of those whiskeys were 5 years old. So obviously Son of Boo Rye, a little bit younger. I love honestly reading this that says gooey butter cake. That's fantastic. This one's always a hit because it's best of both worlds, you know. So if you're not a huge rye fan, Jane, that we were talking about, but you know, maybe you want not as sweet, you kind of want that balance and straddling both worlds, Boo Rye just hits the mark. I love the spirit. I love the story about the jackalopes. And those are mythical creatures. The story on the back label, if you're curious, is really funny. But basically the lore is jackalopes are notoriously hard to catch. They can cast their voice, making you think, you know, they're nearby or further away, and kind of, you know, playing tricks on you because they're a little cheeky. And so the trick to catch them was they like to imbibe. So if you leave a little bit of whiskey out for them, they'll imbibe, and then they get a little drowsy, a little slower, and they're easier to catch. So fun little campfire story there. Delicious spirit. I would love personally to see this come back as a national release sometime soon. So we all put it out in the universe. Maybe it'll come back to us. We were told to search for them at summer camp. I love that. Did you ever find one? For those that don't know, a jackalope is a cross between a jackrabbit and an antelope. So I forgot that little piece. That's really funny. Tony, you're welcome for that on behalf of High West. Again, it's super important to us. And we appreciate everything that our brave firefighters do, all the people involved, emergency responders, and just that whole community, the families of them, because we know that's not easy too. And we just want to provide another avenue of resources for them. And it's really important to us. So appreciate that and your service there. A lot of people's favorites, Midwinter Night's Dram. I know some of you in the poll were saying, can I pick it? If you have some to drink tonight, go for it. Sorry, I couldn't source any for you. It went like hotcakes this year, so I couldn't even find a bottle. They were all sold out, and we don't have any in inventory. But if you are fortunate enough to grab a bottle, this is our Rendezvous Rye, and it's finished as it says in the Tawny and Ruby port barrels. Pretty iconic. Get those soft fruit note, like red fruit notes that just play beautifully with the Rendezvous and with that spice and those layers of complex flavors. This year, you know, you can only imagine, you've heard me say over and over again how much I love this year's Rendezvous. So it's only natural that Midwinter would be just as phenomenal. Great flavor profile. The finish in particular is really yummy. High proof, just, you know, coming in at 98.6. We actually, so this is our recent points on that in 2022. Believe we recently got an award for 2023 in Act 10. Because 2022 was our 10th anniversary of producing Midwinter, we had so much fun and playing around that we actually released a second iteration of it last year called The Encore. Very small production. And we actually took the Rendezvous and we aged it in white port barrels. So really intriguing. I think we had called out earlier some like stone fruit flavors. That's what I get on the Encore, is some of that apricot, some just like fig, just really cool flavors coming out, which it was a great experiment that paid off really well. So I was a big fan. And then these are a couple of our ultra premium limited releases that, you know, if you find it bottled in bond, you won't find in California, but next year you can. Prisoner Share, again, it was that 2-year collaboration with the Prisoner Wine Company. So we took a blend of our bourbon and our rye, and we finished it for 11 months in the Prisoner Red Blend barrel. So if you know anything about Prisoner Red Blend, that brand is over 20 years old, and it's anchored by Zen, has some Cab, some Petit Verdot, I think. So you got kind of some of those Bordeaux varietals, but really anchored by Zen. So some good spice, red fruit, dark fruit, that really bring out and play. If you love midwinter, I would say Prisoner is on that same path, but maybe a little more fruit forward, or like some of those notes coming out. Obviously sitting in those wine barrels are just absolutely delicious. And then bottled and bond. I actually got a bottle, and you can see I dipped into it. I cracked it open for the first time. And it was very surprising. I feel like I need to revisit and see how it is again. It's made with a mash bill of 80%, obviously High West distillate, being bottled in bond, minimum of 4 years. This is actually 5 years. And I think we did a pretty good job. I'm really loving it. Getting to taste it. It's a little bit, honestly, a little bit sweeter than I was expecting. A little more of those like caramel, brown sugar, like toffee, like sweet toffee notes. But in a really delicious, easy sipping kind of way. So I'm super excited to see how this particular mark evolves as we continue to make more of it. I feel like I've been talking a lot here. Anything anybody wants to add before I kind of close this out, and then we can just open up the floor for any other dialogue?
No, we did a poll, and then we got to take a group photo, so nobody leave. But yeah.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. If you guys are on the go or you don't want to make your own cocktail, I'd be remiss if I don't tell you about these barrel aged cocktails we got going on from High West. So we take a blend of our bourbon and our rye, and we actually make an old fashioned. We also have a Manhattan, and we finish it in our rye whiskey barrels for 6 months. So they are barrel aged cocktails, bottled, shelf stable. And they were actually made, the recipe from our team, our hospitality team. So I already told you, we have an award-winning hospitality program. Because of Utah's unique laws, once upon a time, we had to do a split-based old-fashioned at the distillery. So we had to split the base between bourbon and rye, which is how our signature old-fashioned is still made to this day. And that's how our old fashioned and the cocktail, as well as the Manhattan, are made. So if you guys are on the go, we make them in 375s as well as 750s. These are great for like taking to a party, quick pour. I would put up some of these like against an actual like, one-off freshly made cocktail. Really, really good. We wanted to get on the game, but we didn't want to just throw anything out there. So a lot of testing, a lot of trials to just get it right and make it shelf stable. And we get a really great response on these. So if you're ever out there and you're like, oh, I don't want to make it tonight, I don't want to get the ingredients, know that you have a nice little cocktail option. It's either an old fashioned or a Manhattan. So with that's High West. I'm going to stop the show there. Let me see. How do I stop screen sharing now? There we go.
All right. Well, first things first, I'm going to invite everyone to come on camera and pull up a dram. You were on such a good roll. I didn't want to interrupt. We do have our customary photo to take. We lost James, but he's 3 hours ahead. So
oh, goodness.
This time. But yes, Jason, do it. Get on camera. Don't be the one. All right. Well, either way, thank you so much for finally making this happen. This was awesome to learn about High West and hang out with you. So cheers, raise a glass or a bottle, smile to the camera. Got it. And then we all voted for our favorite pour of the night. You get to pick what you think was our favorite. You get to guess what you think was our favorite.
Who gets to guess? I get to guess?
Yep.
Oh man.
Oh.
No pressure. All the pressure.
No pressure. I mean, I feel like got some cool response on the cash strength, the rendezvous, campfire even. I don't know. I feel like this maybe was a rendezvous crowd, but maybe not. I don't know.
All right. Locking it in. That's your final answer?
No, because if I were on like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I'd be that person that waits till the last second. I don't know. I think I might I actually might go with you can tell I don't like to be wrong. Let's just do the cash drink because that's what I was really digging tonight.
Follow your heart.
See if you guys
Final
were in line
answer?
with me. It's hard to say because I love the rye too, and obviously that's what people love. But I'm gonna lock in, sir. Let's do the cash drink bourbon.
Okay.
Bianca gets a choice too.
Yeah,
Bianca has to pick.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
Bianca,
know.
what do you think? What do you
put
think?
her on spot.
I feel like we got a lot of different feedback. My heart is saying campfire, for some reason, so I'm gonna run with that. But I don't know. We did get a lot of rendezvous feedback, so this is a tough spot to be.
You're only betting a bottle on this. It's all good.
Only betting a bottle. Oh man.
Oh, news to me.
Bottle for each of us.
Oh wow. Not one of those tastings, not this time. All right.
Now
drum
we
roll,
have to know.
please. The results are in, and the people have voted for their favorite expression of the night.
It's rendezvous, isn't it? Barrel pick. Nice. Nice. Very good.
So barrel
Oh,
love
High
it.
Country did pretty well too. I love that.
Love
we
it.
got 44% for the barrel pick, and then second place is High Country. Wow.
Beautiful.
I felt we got some good response for High Country, which I'm
Right.
loving. But I'm telling you, there's something special about this cash drink, and people have just been really really digging it. So I'm glad you guys are feeling the same way.
Why she's a professional.
And well, that was fun. Jason, did you still want to do that? What you messaged me about?
Yeah, sure.
All
So
right.
I always have gotten in the habit of saving a couple ounces for many pours I like, and so I told Vadim if he wants to give something away. I have 1 ounce left of the Midwinter Night Dram Act 6. This was the first year I think that they actually added High West distillate to the Midwinter. And so he's gonna do the randomizer and give it away a 1 ounce of that I'll get to him.
Oh, that's so nice.
So while we do that, Becky, do you know anything about that one? Talk about it. I'm gonna.
I don't, but honestly, that Jason, that does sound right. And like I said, those years kind of start to blend together, but that does strike me as correct because that would have been around the time, yeah, when we started putting more of our own distillate in. We started blending more rendezvous, like still figuring out that flavor profile. And so that does totally make sense. That would have been around the time, which would be when the last time I had like Act 4 was very different than when you skip ahead to like Act, 6, 7, and 8. So yeah.
My first one I found was when I was living in Boston, and I randomly came across Act 3 and didn't know who you all were at the time, and that was back 2010, 11, and 12. I think I was there.
Okay. So we were probably still working. We've always been with MGP. We were doing Barton.
Barton, I think, was a big one.
Yeah, we did. We did a lot with Barton. Yippee-ki-yay, around that time was sourced with Barton 1792 as well. And everybody, of course, always like, what happened to Yippee? I love Yippee. Was it coming back? I can say with full authority in 2026, Yippee-ki-yay will be making a return, a very expensive return. So if anyone it's going to be a very small production. And when people ask why, it was basically a lot of that aged whiskey that was being laid back by MGP and Barton's had basically that stock had dried up. So we had kind of run out on that flavor profile, that sourcing, as well as the particular vermouth barrels that we were doing. So if you guys aren't familiar, it was rye finished in Syrah and vermouth barrels, which sound very interesting because Yippee is very interesting. We stopped producing it a few years ago, just merely out of a sourcing, when you're projecting not just for this year and next year, but 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we just weren't going to be able to produce it in the same way. And we didn't want to, our fear was we didn't want to change it and, people be like, this isn't Yippee. But it sounds like we've worked out something, and I'm excited to try it, but I did hear the price tag approximately for it. It's definitely for for maybe a more of a whiskey collector and someone who doesn't mind paying a pretty dollar that you might have to sell a kidney for, but but yeah, it will be back in 2026.
Glad you said kidney, not liver, because our livers aren't worth anything at this point.
No. And kidneys, you got 2 of them, right? So
Oh,
most people do. I'm kidding. Please don't sell any organs for whiskey. Don't do it.
Your body, your choice. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, there we go.
Toesies, we got 10 of those.
Yeah, back here, Yippee accidentally popped a batch 6 a while back. Oh man. He said, to be fair, I was drinking. That is honestly, yes.
All right.
Sounds
So,
What
I
did I
found-
do?
I found some Yippee here in LA recently, a couple of bottle shops I've like stumbled upon. And if you like look, you'll see it in like maybe a top tier. Some people just don't know the treasure trove they're sitting on, which is a shame. So I'll go in and I don't tell them, I'll just buy it. And it's like, oh, it's still only like 150 or like 200, when if you find that bottle on like Third Market or something, it's crazy.
all right, I'm gonna share the screen. We're gonna do the randomizer wheel. I'm gonna try a new fun thing.
Oh,
Does that look cool? Can you see it? Is it sharing?
it is spinning.
I'm trying a new Zoom feature. Does it look
Um,
awesome or does it look
It
stupid?
looks great.
All right. So make sure your name's on here. I want to hear no complaining. I mean,
You're
I'll
giving
just-
away.
huh?
What are you giving away?
Jason's giving away a sample of Midwinter Night's Dram.
That's
Oh,
so nice.
All right. So hopefully everybody's name's on here. Shuffled. And I'm gonna spin it.
Oh,
I don't know which side of me it's on. So
There you go.
there you go. That's
Vanna White. I know
Amanda,
that person.
Hello, Amanda.
Are you here? You must be present to
you with
win.
us?
I'm very rarely not here, Medina.
Yes. We love this for you, girl.
So,
Yay! Thank you, Jason.
congratulations.
Awesome. Congrats. And Jason, thanks for sharing. That's awesome.
Jason is always very generous with samples.
We love that.
I
I
love
have
that.
entirely too much whiskey. I have to just give it away.
Too? There's no such thing as too much whiskey.
I think we all
Amanda, tell my wife that.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My boyfriend works in the industry as well, so he's got his fair share of bottles too, and is okay with the merging of the collections. So.
Quite the collection now.
My husband just stands here and goes, "What am I allowed to drink?" And I'm like, that one.
That's what my roommate does. She's like, which bottles can I touch? And I'm like, I'm just gonna mark them for you so you know which ones you can drink out of.
My daughter does that. And then she was like, I was drinking this. I didn't think it was very expensive. I go, oh, no, that's an allocated bottle. She goes, oops.
His daughter is of age, by the way.
He is of age.
Okay.
I mean, I would
Yeah, it
imagine.
wasn't like she's 12, but yeah. She's 28, so
Act 7, 2022. No, yeah, 22. Sorry, I'm doing math. I think 2019 would have been Act 7.
Yeah.
10 was 2022, so it's easy for me to kind of like go back.
have you tasted the Act 11 as well as the Prisoner's Blend?
I have had a taste of this year's Prisoners. I say this year, like the recent batch. And I have a bottle of Act 11 right here. I didn't get my own bottle because we had such limited allocations of it here in the market. I actually think I liked last year's Prisoner Share better, and I love this year's Midwinters better if you're comparing the 2 years back to back. So that's just my personal profile. I think this year's Prisoner Share was still better. I are still great. I just thought maybe with the complexity of the Rendezvous, it was a little more fruit on it than I would have liked. But again, you guys have heard me for the last almost 2 hours, or definitely 2 hours, talking about how much I love Rendezvous and I love its essence. And so I really love that this year, the midwinter, those port notes were a little more subtle, like, just beautifully nuanced and intentionally placed. Whereas Prisoner Share was just a little more, that fruit came forward a little more than I personally would have liked. Whereas last year, the juice was still fantastic. Rendezvous was still great. Midwinter was great, but there was something about, just a really great harmony between, in that aging or that finishing, that really stood out to me. But I do have a little bit of Prisoner Share here. I guess I should, last year's, guess I should try it, revisit, as we like to say. I feel like sometimes over time, you try things and you remember them certain, one way, and then it's you got to go back, because you're like, oh, was it as good as I thought, or was it like this? What is this GIF I'm seeing? Oh, I love
From what I
it.
understand, your palate also changes every like 7 or 8 years, supposedly. So
Yep.
that might be part of it as well.
Oh yeah,
It's
we've
real
been
situational too, about what you ate or what mood you were in or
Yeah.
people you were with sometimes.
Absolutely. So it's always nice to get to taste, I mean, I really enjoy when I have the opportunity to do a side-by-side comparison, because then it's just, I mean, it's right there, in front of you, you're in the same environment, and it's almost like the super, like science geek in me is like, you're doing a little experiment with your taste buds, and you see what you're experiencing, what you're tasting. And I personally really love that. I'm sure probably most of us could agree. It's a fun.
President's Blend wine was so good that when you thought about, when I heard that they were aging the High West, which I liked already, the two was like, oh my God, I have to try that. I got a chance to try one at a restaurant for like, it's like $70 for the pour, which was, but it was one of those ones where after I tasted, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really love this. Where can I find it? And then it's like, almost
Yeah.
impossible to find.
We only, in Southern California, just for like putting this into reference for you, we only had 52 cases. For us, cases mean 6 bottles. So we really, had a very small amount. And that is all of Southern California. So it's basically Paso Robles, all the way down to the border and out to the desert, and then also our allocation, not going to call anybody out, but it's not an intense, point system or anything of that nature. You don't have to sell your soul to get it, but we do, we love to reward great High West supporters, folks that have been partnering with us for years. So they kind of get that first pick of bottles, but even then it's a 2-bottle max. So they're not, we try to spread the love, because we want different communities, different folks, to be able to experience it, whether in a bar or restaurant, or to be able to buy a bottle at, their store of choice. So it's super limited. And then again, in this November will be, that was a 2-year kind of like fun experiment and collaboration. And Prisoner actually released a wine called Complicit, because they took the Prisoner Red Blend and they finished it in our rye barrels.
Saw that.
Yeah, so I actually haven't tasted that wine. I've heard some mixed reviews, but I think again, it's everybody's palate is different. I definitely think it had some strong oak, notes on it, considering that rye flavor, from what I've been told, especially, you think of Prisoner, it's very, big, robust, juicy fruit flavors, dark fruit, but in such a lovely and approachable way. And talk about blending, they're blenders, we're blenders. So it was a fun collaboration. Casa Noble, I'm super, super excited. We've been certified organic at Casa Noble for over 10 years. The Master Taquilero was actually one of the first to lead the Barrel Select program, the first of its kind in tequila. So we also are big blenders at Casa Noble. So it's really exciting that we kind of keep that collaboration, that spirit. So I'm super excited to see what this release holds for us this fall. I've been seeing the Casa Noble barrels in the warehouse, so I'm super stoked. Let's see, Ryan.
You keep teasing us with these other brands that you represent. Should we be expecting them on a virtual tasting in the near future?
You can, if you guys want. We have a really awesome craft spirits portfolio. It's honestly one of the best privileges of my job is just phenomenal work. So we have out of Nashville, Tennessee, we have an incredible Tennessee whiskey called Nelson's Greenbrier, if you guys are familiar with it. Or we also produce Bell Mead for many years, and then we switched over the label to Nelson Brothers. Bianca and I both have a very near and dear like kindred spirit to that brand, to the team there, getting to meet the founders and work with them closely and call them friends. Andy and Charlie Nelson, talk about history in a bottle, the original Tennessee whiskey. So getting to bring that back from pre-prohibition days. I think 2019 was the first bottling since 1909, so 110 years that brand had been underground. So it's really cool that we get to be a part of bringing it back to life. We also have some high rye bourbons, and then we released a rye from them that's partnered with Bardstown, first ever rye whiskey that they laid back. If you travel to Louisville, Kentucky, I know you guys are probably expecting to hear me say whiskey, but shocker, plot twist, we're actually American craft brandy. So Copper and Kings, right there in Butchertown, we have an award-winning American craft brandy, as well as a delightful apple brandy. And we released our first bourbon this year, which was distillery only, but plans to expand there. Got a lot of rave reviews. You should Google Fred Minnick's tasting on it when he was tasting for his top 100 at the end of last year. And his reaction is pretty priceless. Like, love to see it. We also, in the tequila category, I mentioned Casa Noble. We have a sister brand. She's a little bit younger and spicier, if you will, called Mi Campo. And those are actually, that tequila is finished in Napa Valley wine barrels, which is really unique. And then we round out the portfolio with a craft canned cocktail from sister duo out of Austin, Texas, and they're called Austin Cocktails. So that's, you pick your choice. Pick your poison, as they say. Feel like we got some questions. Sorry. Barrel select bottles, black with gold lettering. Is there a way to tell year like the batch numbers? Yes, there is. Well, oh, actually not the same. Each one you'll see has a barrel number and it has a bottle number. I say you'll see. If you find one, I'll try and bring it here. They're all handwritten because everything's like hand bottled and labeled. So barrel number is just obviously from what stock in our, our category system, and then whatever bottle number it came out of. Typically, I'm trying to think, out of a barrel, depends on the size of the barrel and how much angel share we've gifted gifted up. You can roughly get anywhere from 200, I think it's like 256 ish on average bottles out of a standard ASB barrel. So you can kind of see what stock it is. I'd have to go and like look up exactly what barrel. Like, I have to go through some channels, but that's all I got for you as far as actual batch. Yeah, so that's the black and white cask collection. I think follows a similar, no, but maybe not. Oh no, so that's, we actually changed it up. So yeah, thanks Vadim for putting that in there. We labeled these very similarly to how we did our regular lineup. What else do we have? Do you still have all the crazy rye, double rye finishes? That's what this one is. Actually, both of these back here, and I have some over sitting in a box next to me. That's something that we've asked for. We want to bring back the double rye finishes. Obviously being known for rye, people really love them. I have one that's a rum finish. I think the other's a Manhattan finish. I've had 7 Grand used to have a Moscatel, cognac, things like that. So there's still some floating out in the universe, but we don't have plans to bring them back just yet. This year will be cask collection, cask strength, Oloroso sherry, a Sauvignon Blanc barrel, and a Petite Syrah. So that's what you'll expect to see in that new label. Good night, friends. I see people popping off. I realize it's getting late, so.
All
Those
good.
are most of our
Well-
people on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have
Any
some-
other questions? Like, you have at it.
Ask the tough questions. Go ahead. I know Elijah's holding back. All right.
No?
They might be scared of the recording. Let's
Okay.
wrap up the recording and we'll turn it off and we can hang out if we want to. But thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. We look forward to having you back with another brand. But thanks again for making this happen. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I hope y'all learned a lot and obviously tasted a lot.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying that bottle and bond. I really want to taste the juice you guys are making.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. I do want to go back and revisit it and kind of I did a little like nightcap with it with a couple of friends, and I want to go back and kind of do maybe a more analytical, systemic approach to it, and truly digest it all. But it's really, really easy and fun to drink.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, till next time, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you guys for having us.